Srimad Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Guru Maharaj ki jai, jai. So we're continuing with the instructions on the 10th canto, and we'd gone as far as chapter 22. So we'd gone as far as chapter 22. And just to recap that last bit that I did yesterday, where, in chapter 31, 32, like chapter 22, these verses where Lord Krishna is saying that, O Stoka Krishna, O Amsu, O Sudama, Sabala, and Arjuna, O Vrishabha, O Jasvi, Deva Prastha, Varupa Tapa. So he's addressing all the personality. And you see how these greatly fortunate trees, whose lives are completely dedicated to the benefit of others, even while tolerating the wind, rain, heat, and snow, they protect us from these elements. So here we are, actually it's snowing over here. Those who are in places like Mauritius and the place might not realize, but it's really, really snowing out here if you are able to see it. But anyway.
They don't know what they're missing.
Well, I'm trying to just stay warm, but it's really coming down here. Like, I've not seen snow like this in winter, but the trees are obviously out there tolerating it. And as Krishna says, they protect us from all different elements. They certainly give us oxygen. So is how Sri Prabhupada is instructed. The Lord indicates that even trees who are dedicated to the welfare of others are superior to Brahmins who are not. So we'll see later on how Brahmins, had a little bit of an ego in this canto. It comes, where the cowherd boys go to the Brahmins for some prasad or food when they were doing yajna. So they didn't care about the cowherd boys. So we'll come to that later on a little bit. But obviously, trees are dedicating all their life, to the welfare of others, giving oxygen and shelter and all that. So certainly the members of Krishna conscious movement should soberly study this point. So, we are encouraged, in Vrindavan especially, they try to plant more trees, and that's what Vrindavan is, forest of trees, and Krishna loves forests. Because they're to be protected for environmental purposes and all that. But like we covered yesterday, the deforestation and all that doesn't help the planet Earth. So that has to be borne in mind and affects climates and everything as well. So we continue with chapter 23 now, where, because we're going through, we have already covered all these different chapters previously, and we're just focusing on some of the instructions and main key points might come out from these different chapters. And it's been quite a while, because the whole month of Kartik and other times have been dedicated to other activities, which are very beneficial on our spiritual journey. But certainly, we are picking out the instructions mainly. So, thank you for giving me an opportunity to actually expand on this a little bit, and to cover this again and to recap and remind ourselves. The Srimad Bhagavatam is like that. Srimad Bhagavatam is ever fresh. It's eternal as well. And since the time that it was spoken to Lord Brahma, it's only Chatur, 4 slokas that Krishna gives to Brahma. We know from first canto and second canto and all that, and then it's expanded even more. So from those verses, he just expands more and more. And every time we say, within Srimad Bhagavatam, it's sometimes very hard to understand, because it's a conversation within a conversation, and you don't know where it's going, and chronologically some things fit, it doesn't fit. And those who are embarking on the journey to understand Srimad Bhagavatam, it can become a little bit daunting and say, oh, I thought it was Sukadeva Goswami speaking, Vyasdeva was speaking, then now it's Narad Muni, and so they're referring. But Srimad Bhagavatam is written like that. It's not just that one person is glorifying, or one person is the main speaker, but they always give credit to the previous acharyas, previous speakers, like, and ultimately, it's about Krishna, and we learn more about Krishna. So we, in chapter 23, then we are being instructed in this pastime with the cowherd boys, the Brahmins and their wives, how Krishna exposed the Brahmins' foolish arrogance and established the glories of his own transcendental beauty by attracting their wives to surrender at his lotus feet. So this is what happened. This is the pastime that, Krishna is comparing how, trees are better than Brahman, because once when Krishna and the cowherd boys were all in the pastime together and they were felt a bit hungry, so the cowherd boys said, Krishna, what's with this? Krishna says, oh, okay, why don't you go to these Brahmins here? They're doing a yagya, and ask them to see if you can give them, they'll give you some food, prasad. And they went there and they stood there and asked. The Brahmins were arrogantly just, didn't give any attention to the cowherd boys, and then they went back and said, oh, Krishna, they just didn't give us any food. And then he said, okay, they go to their wives instead then. So all the cowherd boys, approached Brahma's wives, and they immediately realized, oh, Krishna is in the vicinity, and they started cooking different food, and they brought it to Krishna and the cowherd boys and fed them nicely and all that. So then that kind of exposed the egoistic kind of approach of the Brahmins. But the wives were very, very, obviously generally women and the wives are more understanding to the emotions and all that, and then more devoted. And these Brahmins' wives were more devoted to Krishna and Balaram and the cowherd boys. So that actually showed how the Brahmins themselves then later on are reflecting on the lack of Krishna consciousness. And we're unable to, and they were saying that, oh, we are unable to touch the Lord's lotus feet and see him face to face, whereas our wives were able to do that, and the Brahmins then realize. So that's what happens in chapter 23. Chapter 24. So then it's interesting how Krishna convinces Nanda Maharaj to worship Govardhan Hill instead of Lord Indra. So in this chapter, we come to the pastimes of Krishna when Nanda Maharaj, who's getting ready to sort of go and worship Indra, and he's doing elaborate worship, and then Krishna is arguing with him, or kind of not arguing, but reasoning with him. Why do you have to worship Indra, Okay, so Krishna because these pastimes, he said, in fact, Govardhan Hill is more important, and so Krishna actually, how Krishna convinces Nanda Maharaj is something we should study a little bit. So we should study his reasoning and convincing arguments and understand how he got all the Brajvasis to worship him instead in the form of Govardhan Hill. So that's why we worship the Govardhan Hill. We have part of we go on parikrama around the Govardhan Hill, and it's still being worshipped. And we devotees go to Vrindavan. It's wonderful to do the parikrama there. And then Govardhan Hill itself, on top of it, the amazing things are there. The temples of there are some amazing temples around there. And recently I saw an article where there were quite a lot of illegal encroachment of land around Govardhan. And they suddenly start to establish mosques, madrasas, and some other illegal temples. So the UP government is demolishing them, and they're making Vrindavan and the Govardhan Hill more exposed to the pilgrims when they come. So it's the land is quite, even historically, Govardhan Hill was trying to be attacked by personalities like Aurangzeb, and I've read some and heard some pastimes or stories about how Govardhan Hill was being attacked and temples were being demolished by Aurangzeb. But when he tried to attack the Govardhan in some Govardhan hill around there, he actually started to see some vision of lions and armies and all that, and his army just ran away. So there's quite a few, pastimes like that around Govardhan Hill, even to this day. And so here, obviously, Nanda Maharaj was quite convinced, and then they worshipped the Govardhan Hill instead. And that actually, this obviously made Lord Indra very angry. He said, well, how, this is meant to be, this worship and these offerings are meant for me. And his arrogance came out, and Lord Indra then made it very difficult for the Brijbasis. He made thunderstorms and lightning and floods and all that in that area, and the Brijbasis had to take shelter, approach Krishna and say, how are we going to deal with this? And then Krishna lifts the Govardhan hill, and then he protects the Brijbasis, and we know that pastime. I think I've got a picture, but Srila Prabhupada in chapter 25 then informs us in the purport that well-tended cows produce large quantities of milk, from which come cheese, butter, yogurt, ghee, and so on. These foods are delicious by themselves and also enhances other foods such as fruit, vegetables, and grains. Bread and vegetables are delicious with butter, and fruit is especially appetizing when mixed with cream and yogurt. So we love our bread with butter on it, and certainly we like cream and yogurt with fruit salads that we make. The dairy products are always desirable in civilized society, and the surplus can be traded for many valuable commodities. And we see that cheese in large quantities being sold in supermarkets, and yogurt, cream, and thus simply by a Vedic dairy enterprise, the residents of Vrindavan were wealthy, healthy, and happy, even in the material sense. And most of all, they were eternal associates of the Supreme Lord Krishna. So Brijbasi's main economy was based around milk and milk products and fruit, vegetable, and grains. And that's really the Vedic way of living. You still go to Bharat and we'll find so many different types of rasmalais and rasgullas and all that, made out of dairy products. And it's sufficient enough for people to make a living out of that as well. So that's being encouraged, and also how this situation creates envy and pride, even in the demigods like Lord Indra. So this goes back like towards the Govardhan Hill again, where Indra, does situations can create envy in Lord Indra, because obviously Brijvasis were going to worship the Govardhan Hill, who then got this pride smashed by Krishna in this pastime of lifting of Govardhan Hill. So in these couple of chapters here, it's all about the Govardhan Hill lifting. Srila Prabhupada explaining more and more about why cow protection is more important, how forest protection is more important, and trees. So that's all amazing, He further explains why Krishna does these pastimes. Just as hunger can be said to enhance the pleasure of eating, similarly, the residents of Vrindavan, although not experiencing ordinary material anxiety, felt a type of distress at the activities of Indra, and thus intensified their meditation on Krishna. So this is, they felt the distress by the activities of Indra, but they actually intensified, and focused more on Krishna and meditated even more Krishna. And as Krishna was lifting the hill and with his little finger, they all tried to support him and thank Krishna with their little sticks and things like that, and we see that picture here, how wonderfully this is depicted, Govardhan Hill, and all the Brijbasis trying. This is obviously like diorama when we go to pilgrim, and this pastimes, Govardhan Hill is amazing. So It's important, these pastimes that come up there, you know. So, Govardhan, yeah, Giri Govardhan ki jai. So, chapter 26, then, purport to verse 21 is so wonderful in relation to our current situation and to what Garga Muni said to Nanda Maharaj. So, this is the part where Garga Muni is going to go to Nanda Maharaj, and this pastime where he goes to request Krishna to be taken to Mathura or something like that. I think it comes to that part where he has to face and defeat Kans. So Srila Prabhupada has especially indicated in this connection that just as Lord Krishna's associates could not be defeated by Kans, so his modern day devotees will not be defeated by their demoniac opponents, nor will the Lord's devotees be defeated by the internal enemies, the lusty, materialistic senses. So, Srila Prabhupada is here explaining just as, Krishna's associate could not be defeated by Kans. So Kans couldn't really defeat Krishna and his associates, and although Kans tried to put so many difficulties for the Brijbasis, and they're all devotees of Krishna, but in comparison to that, with modern day devotees, even like Srila Prabhupada came out to the West, he's a pure devotee of Lord Krishna, and he presented the philosophy, and a lot of the times, these opponents, they try to defeat him on so many philosophical points or spiritual points, but they couldn't defeat him. And even if we listen to Srila Prabhupada's discussions with some of these reporters, we get amazed how Srila Prabhupada can answer and defeat any logics, with whether they be Mayavadis or impersonalists or atheists or anyone. But then again, there are these enemies, external and internal. Internally, we lust, anger, greed. These are all our own enemies as well. Our own mind can be our own enemy. So by being Krishna conscious, by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, taking shelter of Krishna, being in association with Krishna's associates, certainly a lot of these internal enemies can be subdued and defeated. So these are my viewpoints. So hopefully you kind of agree with that, but Srila Prabhupada has really made that very clear as well. So chapter 27, from these comments in this purport, Lord Krishna ordered Indra to return to his proper position in heaven and to serve there without egotism. Indra, also with a cow Surabhi, then performed a bathing ceremony for Krishna using the water of the heavenly Ganges and the milk of Mother Surabhi. Indra and the cow took this opportunity to bestow upon the Lord the name Govinda, and the demigods showered flowers and recited various prayers. So this is where Krishna gets his name of Govinda. Govinda Jai Jai, Gopala Jai Jai. So Srila Prabhupada instructs us that to also serve without ego and worship cows and glorify Govinda. So this part where even Lord Indra had to come in, with this cow Surabhi. So in chapter 27, there is elaboration of that. So I can't really go back to all the different activities. Sometimes I can't even remember what exactly. It's been a while. I might have to go and reread some of these chapters again myself to remind ourselves again and again. But then it's wonderful, get a chance to do that. So Govinda Jai Jai, Gopala Jai Jai. Chapter 28, it's amazing that as per verse 23, Krishna thought about living entities. And Srila Prabhupada agrees with his thoughts and comments in the purport that, so it's amazing when it's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna thought about the living entities. So it's just like we think, that means Krishna thinks as well. He's a personality, he's a person. It's not some mythological figure or some character out of a comic book or something like that. Krishna is a real personality. And in chapter 12 in Bhagavad Gita, we understand how, Krishna, Arjuna is asking Krishna, should we be worshipping and thinking more about your own personality or your impersonal aspects? And Krishna says, impersonal aspects are very difficult, but the personal, my personality, then obviously it is quite makes sense, but there are some people who want to deny the existence of Krishna, because by nature we are envious of God anyway. That's what atheism is. They want to deny the existence of God, and that's why they have that viewpoint that we want to enjoy God's property but deny God. We want to enjoy everything that's on the earth and the universe and not necessarily respect the person. So people in general are simply ignorant. This is what Prabhupada is saying in comments. And they do not seriously consider their ultimate destination. So it's out of ignorance. As usual, Lord Krishna is able to say many profound and complex things in a few simple words. How fortunate we are that God is not a dry field of energy, a transcendent or effulgent blob somewhere. I like what Prabhupada puts it, in an effulgent blob somewhere, and nothing at all. Because sometimes people think we believe in like nirvana, it's voidism. Everything, when we die, everything becomes nothingness. So there is that, the understanding or some philosophical viewpoint. We get sucked into these different philosophies, and we got to be careful. We use our intelligence, and we understand that, how can there be nothingness? How can there just be a bing bang and everything comes out from nothing? So it's just because of ignorance, and as various people would have it. So people think like that, that God is like an effulgent blob or nothing, and it's just a field of energy. And when I meditate, and I remember being involved with a bit of transcendental meditation, I was made to feel that if you meditate and if you want, your consciousness will expand and become as big as the universe, and you can become God. like you become super conscious, and as but luckily now, Prabhupada has made it clear, and we're out of the illusion, and that's why I've said Krishna conscious. We are conscious of Krishna rather than our own consciousness becoming God. So in fact, he is the most wonderful personality of Godhead, full of absolute personal qualities, and certainly whatever we can do, he can do better, as evidenced by his brilliant way of speaking. So even Krishna's way of speaking and using words, and later on I'll cover a bit where we talk about how Krishna can understand languages and how to speak, but Krishna also reveals his transcendental abode to the cowherd men. So there is a part where, Krishna exposes and reveals to the cowherd men the universe, just like he does to Mother Yashoda when he's supposed to be eating some mud, and Mother Yashoda looks into his mouth, and there's a whole universe all there. She sees some amazing things. So Krishna can reveal whenever he wants to. It's said by his mercy and at his own will that he can reveal if he wants to. It's his prerogative. So we have to depend on that and ask for their mercy. And when a chance comes, we may become part of Krishna local. So chapter 29, we're trying to go through this as quickly as I can and try and finish this session. Srila Prabhupada instructs in his purport that since Krishna consciousness cannot be subordinate to any other religious principles, a guru who engages his followers in materialistic, sinful activities loses his status as a guru. Srila Prabhupada stated that the system of monarchy collapsed in Europe because the monarchs abused and exploited their position. So obviously when positions are being used and they abuse and they exploit them, then they lose, obviously it collapses, the system collapses. And any guru who tries to engage the more, a guru is meant to, just like Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita gives the example of what a perfect guru has to be. Arjuna was his disciple at that point. When Arjuna surrenders, Krishna realizes now I have to act as a spiritual master and get Arjuna out of illusion. And that's what his job was. And in the end of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna accepts that my illusion is dispelled now by your guidance, and now everything is very clear to me. And that's how our position is. And when we depend on Srila Prabhupada's purports and Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita, we become in the same position as, we don't fall into illusions anymore. This is one proof that so many devotees come out from any kind of background, being Russians and Chinese and Americans and so many all throughout the world. They've come out of that kind of illusion. First is the bodily concept. We also have to understand the position of the gopis as being on the highest platform of spiritual perfection. They were transcendental to all positive and negative religious considerations. In other words, they were the eternal lovers of the absolute truth. So this is the position of the gopis is being explained later on, chapter 29, 30. Srila Prabhupada mentioned in his purport that great personalities like Goddess Rama, the wife of Vishnu, Shiva, Brahma, are not at all sinful. But in the ecstasy of pure Krishna consciousness, they feel themselves fallen and impure. Thus, desiring to purify themselves, they blissfully take the dust of the lotus feet on their Lord's lotus feet on their heads. So these goddesses are also very fortunate. They are not at all sinful, as Prabhupada says, but they do consider themselves, as fallen in the ecstasy of pure Krishna consciousness. This is when, so they want to purify them. They still want to desiring to purify themselves. So we should be in that state, like we always think we are so impure, not qualified at all, really, and we still have to purify ourselves. Chapter 31 leads us into the famous Gopi Geet, worth reading, studying, listening to, and singing, but above all, understanding its deep, transcendental meaning. So Gopi Geet, which is sung by so many people in different ways, and Karuna Banda at one time sang that so very nicely on our platform here. But amazing Gopi Geet is, so transcendental. And that happens because of the rasa dance. And after rasa dance, Krishna realizes gopis are becoming a little bit too arrogant, and then he disappears for a while, and the gopis are all wondering where Krishna is, and they miss him, and they start to sing this Gopi Geet, and Krishna reappears. So after Krishna reappeared, the 8 principal gopis amongst the 3 million gopis, so you don't realize how many gopis, there are billions and billions of gopis, all over the universes, so, and in Krishna Lok as well. So 3 billion gopis felt ecstasy, and Krishna then explains why and how he reciprocated with them the way he did. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the Lord may not immediately reciprocate fully. In fact, the Lord is truly reciprocating. After all, a sincere devotee always prays to the Lord, please help me to love you purely. Therefore, the Lord's so-called neglect is actually the fulfillment of the devotee's prayers. Lord Krishna intensifies our love for him by apparently separating himself from us. And the result is that we achieved what we really wanted and prayed for, the intense love for the absolute truth, Krishna. Thus, Lord Krishna's apparent negligence is actually his thoughtful reciprocation and the fulfillment of our deepest and the purest desire. So Krishna sometimes separates himself from us. So we realize, that we miss him, and in missing him, we intensify our love for us. It's quite esoteric and actually quite deep to understand that actually. So Krishna also reveals how indebted he is towards the gopis' servitude. So at the end of the Gopi Gita in chapter 32, 31 is there's Gopi Gita, and then later on Krishna explaining and how he says how he actually is so indebted to the gopis, and he just, there's no way they can repay. This is where Krishna, after Rasa dance and with his relation with his gopis, the Gopi Gita, and then so it's wonderful pastimes. Chapter 33, as regard the Rasa dance of Krishna with the gopis, Srila Prabhupada explained that even the demigods in heaven in charge of maintaining propriety in the universe ecstatically accepted the Rasa dance as the ultimate religious affair, completely different from the perverted reflection of the romance we find in this mundane world. So that is a very deep, esoteric, deep religious affair, which even the demigods accept that. Oops.
There's a very nice question by Sunil.
Yeah.
If you want to answer that on the chat, I'll just read it. How to distinguish who is a Brahmin, especially in this age of Kali? Because I hear many times in the Hindu culture that we should give to the Brahmins when somebody has left their body, or maybe better to distribute prasad, something like that. So,
yeah, well, obviously, in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to establish who the real Brahmins are. The Brahminical culture has been diminished quite a lot, and it's difficult. There are Brahmins who are just involved in doing karma kanda activities. We still need that in a subtle way. The Brahminical culture is still there. The societies, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, the society according to Varnashram system is always going to be there. The Brahmins, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Kshatriyas, but they become a bit corrupted, obscured, or covered up, or kind of, there are very gray boundaries, I feel, and really the Brahmins are the ones who, even within Krishna consciousness, we know devotees are being trained to acquire more and more Brahminical qualities. So they get trained to do puja, worship, and some of them are a lot better. And they take second initiation, which is like on the second level, they get Gayatri mantra, and they get the Brahman initiation as such. But I would say they are proper Brahmins, but Brahmins are not by birth. It's not that, there is like a community of Brahmins, and then the son is born and so he's automatically a Brahmin. That's not how it works. It's like you can't say a doctor's son is also a doctor. Just he has to go through some training and all that. So by merit, by training, and by studying Vedas and Shastras, but in some parts of Bharat, there's still at least some sort of training being given towards some do become, Brahmins. And I know some, very nice Brahmins, they still study the Vedas, but they're still not in their full understanding of who Krishna is. Just like we covered here, even Krishna tested the Brahmins, and the Brahmins were doing the yajnas and everything, but their wives understood Krishna, and they were more Krishna conscious, in fact, than the Brahmins. So sometimes Brahmins get very proud in their thinking, we are so good at our yajnas and all that, mantras and everything. but they're still required, so from our point of view, when we do some certain ceremonies, we accept that Brahmins will do their proper duty and do the mantras and the vidhi accordingly, and it'll be as bona fide as it can be, and we have to just accept that. I hope that helps.
That's useful. Thank you. Because Prabhupada used to say, didn't he, that one has to act as a Brahmin, not just to be born as a Brahmin, but the karma must follow.
That's right. It is by qualification, by action, and they, by training. Yeah.
By training, yeah.
So I hope that helps. If there are any questions, I'm just going to say, I think we did up to chapter 40. So I'm on chapter
so that's fine.
33.
Yeah,
so
you can finish off tomorrow if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Tomorrow I may not be around, still working it out, but you can carry on. It's good.
Okay, so I'll just have a little bit to finish off now, and
Yeah, sure.
So, okay, if there are any other questions, by all means, if there's
Yes.
comments, anybody wants to say anything, then by all means, feel free to say.
So now, was that okay about the Brahmins?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, it's a bit confusing, but anyway, we have to deal with this. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah, it can be confusing, but the main thing is just because one is born in a family of Brahmin doesn't automatically make that person a Brahmin. And or vice versa, Shudra, same thing.
Yeah, in regard to this, I remember my own personal experience of how I had got caught up in, I understand that, my association with certain devotees who perform yagyas, recently I had a yagya done at my house, and he's from Leicester, and he's such a nice devotee and disciple of one of the gurus. I think he's a teacher, maybe, but I don't know. He came and did a very nice Narsinga Yagya, and he's so good at the mantras and everything, so humble. I would class him more as a Brahmin than once the so-called Brahmin I had to, a long time ago, as I'm talking about in the 1996 or 97, when my family, after my father passed away, we had to do a Bhagavad Sapta. So all my family agreed that we should have somebody qualified enough to do a sapta, and we were going to try and call somebody from Bharat. We thought somebody from Bharat would be more qualified to do a proper Bhagavatam sapta, but then we thought, no, locally, because I knew a Brahmin serving in a temple here, and he said, no, I know my relative, my sort of so-called Brahmin, he lives in Leicester, and he's qualified, he does sapta. So we engaged him in doing a sapta for 7 days, and he turned out to be a really nice. He did it very nicely, professionally. I thought we decided we'd give him a chance because he's young. He's embarking on this journey of becoming a sapta, reciting sapta and his Brahmanical qualities and all that. And then once that was done, unfortunately, it was an incident that he got involved with where he had done something really bad. I wouldn't like to say what he was engaged with and all that. And he had to go to prison for it and all that. And later on, we found out that, although he was a Brahmin, he was doing sapta and he was doing yagyas and all these things. But what he had done was let himself down. He didn't behave himself properly in a certain situation. And then he was... he's discredited himself, though. And later on, after a few years, we found out about it. And this Brahmin in Coventry that I got, he felt embarrassed to even approach us anymore because he said, I recommended, and he turned out to be this. But we have to accept that, he did Bhagavatam, but Bhagavatam is pure. So whatever he did, there's no there's no, what shall I say, it's not tainted because the Bhagavatam is pure. So whatever he did was pure. The Bhagavatam is pure. So that's not tainted in any way. But his character might be tainted. That's another thing. So he didn't behave himself like a Brahmin. So I wouldn't class him as a Brahmin anymore as such. But then he may rectify himself. And then I may have to give his, I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. And I'm not the executioner here either. So it's up to Krishna and to decide who is who and at what level. I'm only trying to become just a humble enough devotee. I could just develop some sort of love for Krishna in my life. That's all.
Thank you. Okay.
Only by the mercy of my Guru Maharaj and Srila Prabhupada and Lord Chaitanya that I'm able to do this and to understand even this little bit that I'm explaining. And but only because now, as Prabhupada says, once you start to have a little bit of faith in this Krishna consciousness and chanting, then associate with devotees. And then this association, even with Nabi Prabhu, is my God brother, we associate coming like this, association is important. So that keeps us on advancing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, if there's no more questions, we can stop and go to the Nashinga Kavach. Jai Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.